Okay, so now if you guys read my other post about your steel selection, then you'll understand that a good steel is one of the most important parts of bladesmithing. So today, we're going to make the Happy Camper, the blade that I showed, out of this. This is a bar of 1095 steel. Now I recommend going on to knifemaking.com and checking out some of the prices. We're going to be doing a piece that's out of 3/16 thick. There's a puppy dog here. We're going to be doing a piece that's 3/16 thick and 1.5 inches wide. Now for me, that's a very good size for a very basic knife. It's very simple. So all we're going to need to do is take this piece and forge it into a high quality blade. Super easy. We'll do a very basic design. We'll do a very straightforward design so that there's minimal work and you have nothing to worry about. So the first step is to choose your steel. I recommend 1095. Also, extremely important is good personal protective equipment. There is nothing more important to me than keeping yourself safe. Also, make sure you have good heat shields around your equipment. You don't want to burn something down. Be extremely aware. Make sure you have a fire extinguisher nearby, okay? And gloves. As you can tell, I got lots of little burns and cuts all over me. It is definitely part of the experience. Definitely a part of the experience, but you can limit as much as you can to benefit yourself. So, we're ready to go. Okay, we've got our steel choice. It is here in the forge. On this particular forge, this is how you light it. Now, one of the most important things you're going to find is temperature control. All right, that is key in order to having a solid, strong blade that's not going to give you any issues. Look how it's already cooling off. See, if I shade it here, you'll see it's cooling off here and here. The reason being, these are the two areas that are touching the anvil. The anvil will suck the heat from your material. Look how quickly it's cooled down. That is normal. So if you hammer while it's cold, you could cause lots and lots of little micro fractures in here that may not even necessarily show up until the blade is put under stress. Or it's going to snap when you go to quench it. All kinds of different things. If you hammer while it's too hot, well, the danger is that you'll end up cooking your steel. And the hotter it is, the easier it is to move. So there's a balance, as you can tell. Sometimes it's too hot, sometimes it's too cold. You need to know when to stop and when you're good and safe to forge. So clearly now, dark, 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 barely cherry, definitely not time to hammer. If I were to hammer on this, it would cause lots of different problems. Most likely, you'll cause micro cracks inside and really jack up the structure of the grain of your blade. So don't hammer on cold steel, ever, ever, ever. Big, big no-no. All right, to start us off, we need to forge in the tip of the blade. And as you can see with the square stock, that is not the shape of a knife blade. So before we do that, quick note, you'll see that it's getting these little black specks. That's just forge scale. It's oxidation. It's not a big deal. But the more that you leave it on as you forge, you'll actually start kind of pounding that in. So the more you keep your material clean, within reason, you don't want 1,000 heats just to get a simple blade, the less work you'll have to do later. So keep it off of your material and keep it off of your anvil, and that will prove to be helpful later because you'll have less grinding to do. Now there are a number of methods in order to forge in the tip. One method is to take it and hang it slightly over the edge and hammer straight down. But that'll start giving you a tiny little notch there, which is fine because you bring it in, flatten it out a little bit, and then repeat the same process at a little bit of an angle, and it starts to take out that notch. The reason you want to do it both ways is because when you hang it over, it pushes that material down and it starts to form that tip already. Whereas if I were to take the material and only hammer straight down, you'll get what's called fish lips. And that means that the material, instead of going like this, it'll start going like this in a bad way because both ends will flare and you'll get these fish lips on the tip. And that you don't want that because that causes a cold shot that even if you grind it out, there could be a crease in there that you don't see, which is a weak point in the material. So to do that, well, to prevent that, like we were saying, learn to work your material. Don't go too far or else you won't be able to get rid of that notch. You won't be able to get rid of the notch. So really, find a way that works for you. Well, you see how it's already working? It's drawing that out into a tip and you're not developing a big notch in the back. Which, maybe you want a notch in the back. I don't know. It's your blade. But as you see it start to cool, throw it back in the forge. Don't take a chance. Use the heat and let the heat and the hammer do the work. Don't kill yourself trying to move material if it's too cold, especially because you could damage it. Another important point to keep in mind while you're forging, it's more important later on, but always forge a little bigger than what you want. It allows you to correct mistakes and allows you to then have an appropriately sized blade after you're done grinding. Okay, so always forge your blade a little bit larger than you expect it to be. Very important. Now, what we have here is a very, very basic design. And that's all we're going to do. We call it a happy camper. What we'll do from here, just to show you how to do it, we'll do a slight drop point. The reason is because one, it's a very common, popular style in bushcraft camping blades. And two, because it's good to see how to do it. A drop point is a solid tip. It's very strong. And I think you'll like it. So we're pretty close to doing it now, as you can tell. We're almost ready to do the bevels. So let's do the drop point. Now, one method for doing the drop point that I like to use, because it's simple, is take it, lay it flat on its spine, and then pop it up just a little bit. Give your hammer blows, and then flatten it again. And you can see a slight drop point already. Now we got a drop point. Now it might look a little odd and not like a traditional drop point because it seems almost like a dagger point, right? Like a lopsided dagger point. Well, that's because we have it forged in the bevels. So what we'll do now is we'll start on the bevels a little bit and that will curve the material back. So in this case, with this method, as we curve the material back, because that's what beveling does, then we'll also have to maintain that drop point. So it'll be a little bit of this, and then a little bit more of this. And it will just be tweaks as we go. It's a little complicated, but it's very simple. Once you figure it out, it's very easy to do. And from there, once we have the bevels established, I'll start working on the handle. You don't necessarily have to do it in this order, but it is an easy way to do it. So here's the demonstration. Never hammer your bevels like this. Always angle it a little bit so that while you hammer on this side, the face of the anvil is establishing the bevel on the other side, just as the hammer is establishing a bevel on this side. And remember, as you hammer, make sure you do it symmetrically. So let's say you flip it here and you hammer a couple times, say 5 to 10 strikes, flip it over, match that the angle, and then continue to do the same thing on the other side to help keep your blade symmetrical. If you do all the work here, then you have a bunch of hammer marks here and a flat side here, and it will start to twist your material all wonky. And if you look down the cutting edge, you'll see it do this a lot, which is a real pain to straighten out. So you might as well just prevent it from happening in the first place. So hammer, flip, hammer, flip. Now just watch and allow me to do a little bit of the forging without losing all my heat. All right, so I flipped the blade around now. We have our basic shape. And now we're going to start hammering in our handle. In order to do so, you've got a number of options. You can use the flat of your hammer, or you can use the cross peen of your hammer. And it really depends on what you're going for. We're going to go for a very, very simple full tang handle. So what I'll be doing is laying it flat on its spine and using the cross peen to establish the basic bevel, to establish the basic start of the handle. And then I'll be flipping around to draw that material out more and make it into a handle. Keep in mind, as you do it, if you go too hard and you don't lay it down and start flattening it out, what you'll get is a huge mushroom effect right here, which is one, ugly, and two, potentially a weak point in the blade. So make sure that as much as you're doing this, you're doing this. Okay, so we have the basic shape of it, right? Now, you'll notice, if you're careful, we need to draw out just a little bit more here for it to be a comfortable hand shape, right? And then what we'll do is we'll hot cut the rest of this, and we'll be able to have do the final work on the handle. So let's go ahead and hot cut it and then fine tune that handle. Now, in order to hot cut, you have a few options. You could use a hardy hole tool, like this hot cut, or you could use a chisel of some sort, whatever you like the most. I personally very much prefer this because it gives me the ability to have both hands. Now I like to cut it at a slight angle. Now with a hardy hole cut tool, and then carefully, so you don't hurt yourself, just break it off. Okay? Put that somewhere safe. I have it in the vise. Now, you'll see it's like, well, that's kind of small. It's because we're not done yet. Let's draw this handle out a little bit more. We're going to increase the contrast here. We're going to increase the indent here, which will help us draw it out. And then we'll flatten it, draw it out more.